There's a lot of talk about desire and seeking and so forth in spiritual communities or spiritual practice or even Buddhism. I don't find that to be the primary disturbance. I find aversion to be the primary disturbance. So a sense of avoidance, a sense of being able to pull back inward to create sort of space between, even before there's a sense of you, there can still be a sense of space such that there's a possibility for something to be other than it is. If there's just an immediate integration with all of the sense fields and so forth, like an animal like Cleo, there's no ability to stand back and perceive that things could be other than they are. But the human can do that. But it requires, this just is a result of many years of looking at the mechanism. It requires a certain mechanistic ability to two things. One is to sort of stand back, which could be called the disintegrative distortion, and one would be to sort of take a picture of how things are and try to formulate a view based on that, which might be the integrative distortion. So those are misrepresentations based on the reflective nature of mind of integration and disintegration in sort of natural appearance. So the sense of self, it appears, is it's like the most fundamental abiding structure possible, because everything else is relegated to the self. So the idea of objects out there in the world, the idea of permanence, the idea of, or maybe not even permanence, but just longevity, something moving through time, all of that, when the self structure is seen through, is clearly seen to be a result of the self structure. Like it's like an extrapolation. So while there can mechanistically be a sense of pulling back, a sense of perhaps distance in the most fundamental way, or in the most subtle way, excuse me. And there can also be a sense of like the mind taking a picture of how things appear to be, such that it can use that picture to construct a world, to construct a timeline. Although I think those can happen in the most simple and subtle way without a structured self appearing. The self is what stabilizes all of it. And it stabilizes it in a very distinct way, in a very convincing way. It's like very binary, actually. It's either there or it's not. And if it's there, the sense of a world is there, a sense of containment, a sense of abiding existence is there. All of those appearances are based on the sense of self. And because those fundamental tendencies to sort of back out of and to formulate a view and even to formulate continuity moving through time, because those are only sort of mental fabrications, they can be seen through very easily without the self structure there. In fact, you can't not see through them, even when they function for a while after the no self realization. There can still be a tendency to sort of for the, I don't know, nervous system to kind of perceive that way, but it's seen through immediately. So there's momentum to it, and that momentum slows down. So the self structure, what it allows, because it's sort of an inversion of experience, it like inverts experience into this feeling of being in an inner world. I don't know how else to say it, but invert. It inverts experience that can't be contained, can't be described in a subject-object conformation, can't be said to be moving through time or even actually existing. It turns that into something that's all of those. It seems to be actually existing. It seems to be moving through time, seems to be dependable, seems to be solid, and apart from a subject. All of that is like within the container of self. The illusion of self allows all that to happen, and to happen continuously. But again, because it's all based on these very simple mechanisms that can be seen through so easily, the self has to be sort of made of something that allows us to overlook that all the time. So that's the avoidance. That's the call it unconsciousness. There's something about the mechanism of mind that allows us to kind of keep overlooking something that's really, really obvious, like constantly overlooking something that's close as your nose to nose with the unknown. And yet somehow the mind just keeps hypnotizing us into believing that there's something continuous there, something continuous here, that there's something solid, that there's something we can depend upon in a certain way, in the way that we expect it to be a certain way, and almost feel like we can control it, like control reality to be the way we think we need it to be. All of that is an illusion, but it's based on a certain kind of, to me, it just feels like fixation. It's an ability to fixate in view. If you can fixate in view, then there's always something hidden from the view. If there's a view, there's something not in the view. And what's not in the view is obscured or obstructed. And that obscuration or obstruction feels like a fixation. And all of that is a sort of avoidance. It's an avoidance of just clear seeing. So another way of talking about realization is to say it's clear seeing. It's simply clear seeing. And it's amazing how obscured things were in retrospect. It's like, how can that happen? Because clarity is like just the nature of appearance. And yet it definitely happens. It definitely appears to happen, the sense of being a self and that structure of self actually obscuring everything. It's like a lens that distorts everything in a way. But it has a sort of stability, in an internal stability, an internal consistency with itself and actually with other apparent selves. So that's why there's like this almost like socially endorsed agreement upon the fact that that exists. Not only does it exist, it should exist, and it can do things, and it has control, and it has agency and will and all of that. But mechanistically, it's really based on just not seeing clearly.